Hello children, Chapter 5 How Far is the River by Ruskin Bond. Reading. Have you ever had the good fortune of living near mountains and caves? Or rivers and valleys? Have you ever had the curiosity to explore these wonders of nature? This story deals with the curiosity of a little boy who wants to explore and enjoy the pleasure of nature while trying to find a river, all by himself. Living in the hills or near the great forest or near the sea does of course make it easier to engage with the natural world. As a boy and then as a young man, a sense of adventure often took me down unknown roads to experiences that were often memorable. Encounters with the larger animals such as leopard were rare, but in the hills there is always something new waiting for you around the next bend. For at every bend, the entire vista are altered and our perspective changes too. When we walk close to nature, we come to a better understanding of life, for it is from the natural world that we first emerged and to which we still belong. Next scene comes. Between the boy and the river was a mountain. I was a small boy and it was a small river, but the mountain was big. The thickly forested mountain hid the river, but I knew it was there and what it looked like. I had never seen the river with my own eyes, but from the villagers I had heard of it, of the fish in its waters, of its rocks and currents and waterfalls, and it only remained for me to touch the water and know it personally. I stood in front of a house on the hill opposite the mountain and gazed across the valley. Dreaming of the river, I was barefooted, not because I couldn't afford shoes, but because I felt free with my feet bare, because I liked the feel of warm stones and cool grass, because not wearing shoes saved me the trouble of taking them off. It was 11 o'clock in the morning and I knew my parents wouldn't be home till evening. There was a loaf of bread I could take with me, and on the way I might find some fruit. Here was a chance I had been waiting for it. It would not come again for a long time because it was seldom that my father and mother visited friends for the entire day. If I came back before dark, they wouldn't know where I had been. I went into the house and wrapped a loaf of bread in a newspaper. Then I closed all the doors and windows. The path to the river dropped steeply into the valley, then rose and went around the big mountain. It was frequently used by the villagers, woodcutters, milkmen, shepherds, mule drivers, but there were no villages beyond the mountain or near the river. I passed a woodcutter and asked him how far it was to the river. He was a short, powerful man with a creased and withered face and muscles that stood out in hard lumps. 7 miles, he said. Why do you want to know? I am going there, I said. Alone? Of course. It will take you 3 hours to reach it, and then you have to come again. It will be getting dark, and it is not an easy road. But I am a good walker, I said, though I had never walked further than the 2 miles between our house and my school. I left the woodcutter and the path and continued down the hill. It was a dizzy, winding path, and I slipped once or twice and slid into a bush or down a slope of slippery pine needles. The hill was covered with lush green ferns, the trees were entangled in creepers, and a great wild dahlia would suddenly rear its golden head from the leaves and ferns. Soon I was in the valley, and the path straightened out and then began and rise. I met a girl who was coming in from the opposite direction. She held a scythe with which she had been cutting grass, and there were rings in her nose and ears, and her arms were covered with heavy bangles. The bangles made music when she moved her wrists. It was as thought her hands spoke a language of their own. How far is to the river? I asked. The girl had probably never been to the river, or she may have been thinking of another one because she said 20 miles without any hesitation. I laughed and ran down the path. A parrot screeched suddenly, flew low over my head, a flash of blue and green. It took the course of the path over my head, and I followed its dipping flight, running until the path rose and the bird disappeared amongst the trees. A trickle of water came down the hillside, and I stopped to drink. The water was cold and sharp, but very refreshing. But I was soon thirsty again. The sun was striking the side of the hill, and the dusty path became hotter, the stones scorching my feet. I was sure I had covered half the distance I had been walking for over an hour. Presently, I saw another boy ahead of me, driving a few goats down the path. How far is the river? I asked. He smiled and said, Oh, not far, just round the next hill and straight down. Feeling hungry, I unwrapped my loaf of bread and broke it into two, offering one half to the boy. We sat on the hillside and ate in silence. When he had finished, we walked on together and began talking. I did not notice the smarting of my feet and the heat of the sun, the distance I had covered and the distance I was yet to cover. But after some time, my companion had to take another path, and once more I was on my own. I missed the village boy. I looked up and down the mountain path, but no one else was in sight. My own home was hidden from view by the side of the mountain, and there was no sign of the river. I began to feel discouraged. If someone had been with me, I would not have faltered, but alone I was conscious of my fatigue and isolation. But I had come more than halfway and couldn't turn back. I had to the river. If I failed, I would always be a little ashamed of the experience. So I walked on past stones, huts, and terraced fields until there were no more fields or huts, only forest and sun and loneliness. There were the men and no sign of man's influence, only trees and rocks and grass and small flowers and sleepers. The silence was impressive and a little frightening. There was no movement except from the bending of grass beneath my feet and the circling of hawk against the blind blue of the sky. Then, as I rounded a sharp bend, I heard the sound of water. I gasped with surprise and happiness and began to run. I slipped and stumbled, but I kept on running until I was able to plunge into the snow-cold mountain water, and the water was blue and white and wonderful. So children, if you like my video, please like it, share it and subscribe it and hit the bell icon. Thank you for watching.